Have you ever contemplated the immense impact of a solitary Supreme Court ruling on law enforcement nationwide? This isn't just an intellectual query, it's an acknowledgement of the Supreme Court's profound power and command. And this paramount court doesn't merely interpret, molds the fundamentals of American society. Its determinations radiate outwards, creating a sweeping influence that not only governs the legal sphere, but also profoundly affects ordinary citizens' lives. From the manner in which we transact business to our interaction with technology and even the precious rights we cherish, the Supreme Court's rulings etch an enduring imprint. This authority is exercised seriously and thoughtfully. Each case presented to the court undergoes rigorous examination, debate, and careful deliberation, all with the mission of ensuring justice and preserving our Constitution's principles. A notable case that exemplifies the Supreme Court's pivotal role in guiding law enforcement was Graham v. Connor in 1989. Our story unfolds in 1984 in the heart of Charlotte, North Carolina, where we meet Dethorne Graham, a man with diabetes who was about to become an unlikely central figure in a pivotal legal case. And on a day like any other, Graham experienced the onset of an insulin reaction. To counteract his symptoms, he did what any diabetic in his position would do. He called a friend and asked him to drive Graham to a nearby convenience store in search of orange juice, a reliable source of sugar. However, destiny had a different plan. When they arrived at the store, Graham's friend quickly pulled up and parked in front of the store with the engine running. Graham jumped out of the car and ran into the store. The store was unusually crowded, and Graham, aware he wouldn't be able to obtain his orange juice in time, decided to leave abruptly. To an unsuspecting onlooker, his actions might have appeared unusual or suspicious. This was precisely the impression it left on City Police Officer M.S. Connor, who was in the vicinity and noticed Graham's hasty exit. As a law enforcement officer, Connor's duty was to investigate potential criminal activities, and he felt obliged to stop Graham. For future video reference, this is known as a Terry stop, and it is based on reasonable suspicion that a crime is afoot. I will do a future video explaining Terry v. Ohio, aka a Terry stop. Back to our story. What ensued was a regrettable misunderstanding that quickly escalated. Disregarding explanations from Graham's friend about his medical condition, the officers operated under the assumption of a potential crime, leading to a rough handling of Graham, which resulted in physical injuries. In the midst of the turmoil, Graham's pleas for sugar went unheeded, as the officers were more focused on addressing what they perceived as a criminal situation rather than a medical. In the confusion, Graham was handcuffed, his medical needs overlooked, leaving him injured and distressed. The encounter with Officer Connor marked a turning point for Dethorne Graham. Unknown at the time, this incident was the catalyst for a monumental legal battle, one that would be remembered as Graham v. Connor. The circumstances raised several questions about the use of force by law enforcement officers, putting Officer Connor's actions under scrutiny to determine if they were justified or excessive. This incident illuminated the complexities of police duty and the tragic consequences of a misunderstanding. Graham v. Connor's legal battle against Officer Connor was a whirlwind of complexities and legal intricacies. As we dive deeper into the labyrinth of this significant case, it's crucial to note that the journey from the district court to the Supreme Court is a veritable maze of legal challenges. It encompasses an array of legal confrontations, appeals, and a plethora of that painstakingly constructed and rebutted. The case of Graham v. Connor was a perfect epitome of this. The legal proceedings kicked off at the United States District Court for the Western District of North Carolina. Here, Graham's legal team launched an argument suggesting Officer Connor's actions were tantamount to an unreasonable seizure under the Fourth Amendment and hence a breach of Graham's constitutional rights. Officer Connor's defense, however, took on the monumental challenge of justifying his actions. They asserted that the situation was fraught, unpredictable, and rapidly changing, circumstances that warranted the use of force. Moreover, the defense put forth the plea that the officers' actions were reasonable, given the circumstances then present. The district court gave a verdict in favor of Officer Connor, declaring his actions as indeed reasonable. Unhappy with the district court's verdict, Graham's legal team filed an appeal with the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. This court concurred with the district court, stating that Officer Connors did not breach the Constitution. However, Graham's lawyers didn't back down and petitioned the Supreme Court for a writ of certiorari, a plea for the Supreme Court to reevaluate the case. The Supreme Court conceded to their request, adding another layer to the legal labyrinth. The Supreme Court's challenge was now to scrutinize the case through the prism of the Fourth Amendment and the reasonableness standard. The defense team faced the daunting task of convincing the Supreme Court of the reasonability of Officer Connors' actions under the given circumstances. In the landmark year of 1989, the Supreme Court made a significant ruling that resonated across law enforcement agencies throughout the country. This pivotal ruling was in the case of Graham v. Connor, and it established a new threshold on how law enforcement activities were to be evaluated and scrutinized. The Supreme Court clear, objective criteria for officers to understand when the use of force would be considered excessive, striking a balance between effective law enforcement and the rights of individuals. They had the task of ensuring the standard set would be fair, protecting the interests of law enforcement officers and the individuals they interact with. The court established the objective reasonableness standard, replacing the previous subjective standard that relied heavily on the officer's personal perception and fear. The objective reasonableness standard is designed to focus what a reasonable officer would do under the same set of circumstances, considering the severity of the crime. Whether the suspect poses an immediate threat and whether the suspect is resisting arrest. It seeks to judge the reasonableness of force from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene, rather than in retrospect. Supreme Court recognized that law enforcement officers often have to make split-second decisions, and it was important that they weren't held to an unachievable standard of perfection. Their decision in Graham v. Connor examined whether the officer's actions were objectively reasonable in light of all the facts, without focusing on the officer's underlying intent or motivation. Through this, the court's ruling shifted the focus away from the subjective thoughts of the officer during the incident, and rather onto what a reasonable officer would have done in the same circumstances. It acknowledged the demanding, uncertain, and rapidly evolving nature of situations law enforcement officers face daily. This pivotal ruling v. Connor set a groundbreaking precedent for all future cases. It served as a guide that has shaped the way law enforcement officers carry out their duties and how their actions are evaluated in courts. It provided clear, objective guidelines, balancing the need for effective law enforcement with the preservation of individual rights, thus shaping our current understanding of the use of force by law enforcement. The landmark ruling of the Supreme Court in Graham v. Connor continues to reverberate in modern times. This pivotal verdict has not only shaped the training and decision-making processes of law enforcement in the United States, but has also played a role in ongoing efforts to improve policing. A key takeaway from the Graham v. Connor decision was the establishment of the objective reasonableness standard for all law enforcement officers. This means that the evaluation of an officer's use of force should be from the standpoint of a reasonable officer at the scene, not from the vantage point of hindsight. This objective reasonableness standard has been paramount in transforming police training across the country by shaping how officers are trained to react in high-pressure situations. Moreover, it has become deeply ingrained in the decision-making fabric of law enforcement. When faced with a potential threat, officers must swiftly assess the situation, considering the seriousness of the crime, potential danger to themselves or others, and whether the suspect is actively resisting or attempting to escape arrest. These factors, underscored in the Graham v. Connor decision, now form the core of an officer's instant judgment. While there are differing viewpoints around this case, the objective reasonableness standard is being seen increasingly as a vital tool that lends clarity to an officer's judgment, giving them the needed latitude in dealing with complex situations. It helps foster a safer environment for both the public and the officers. The legacy of Graham v. Connor attests to the transformative power of the Supreme Court and its capacity to steer the course of American law enforcement. It has set a precedent that plays an active role in the enhancement of police practices and policies today, making it a cornerstone in the current discourse about police use.
I hope you enjoyed this use of force focus. This is going to be use of force, case law, etc., as it pertains to law enforcement and today's policing. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.
Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out.